Good evening, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And tonight, I'm really looking forward to once again having an interview for a little while with our Amber Connor. Amber's one of the faithful Ospreys from Georgia, from Atlanta, Georgia. And we had a great talk about a month ago or so, and got a great response from the chat room and the comments. Said, have Amber back. And I said, it's easy for me. I'd be delighted to have Amber back. So Amber, thanks for joining us again. It's great to have you with us, and welcome.
Thank you for having me, John. It's good to talk with everyone.
Yeah, I feel like we're starting to really integrate a lot of stuff together, and geographically as well as politically. And well, what's been on your mind lately in terms of your life? Or if you want, we can go ahead and jump into politics. But what's the big thing that's been on your mind in the past few days?
I would say local politics. Uh, Local politics is everything. That's how we get who we have in Washington. It starts local. Our local legislation hears our concerns as constituents, and then the parties will put up the people that they want to go into the federal government, and so they really need to hear the voice of the people from every county, city, zone, district. These are very important, and it's very time consuming, yes, and it can feel burdensome. But at the same time, when you have your hand on local elections, you can actually get to know your government. And you would find that when people or the constituency meet with your local politicians, they may not like you or may not feel like you're that necessary because you're not a huge donor. However, it makes it that much more difficult to be deceitful because you're proactively contacting them, asking for meetings with them. And like my grandmother said, when you lie, you just have to cover it up with another lie. So it's really important when dealing in deceit or dealing with people who are tempted to push forward with big money rather than what their constituents are yearning for, is to somewhat hold their feet to the fire to explain, and let them know you're not going to be ignored, especially when it comes to where you live and where they're expecting you to pay taxes. So you actually earn a voice and you earn a seat at the table. And I would encourage everybody to, even if it's someone who's been in politics forever and you're just like, oh, this person, really take the time, go and meet with them, and you'll find that you'll get a little further than you thought you could.
Is there a particular issue that has activated you? I know you've been active for quite some time and a supporter of President Trump, but local issues, how about that?
Yes. So about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a huge uptick in crime. And what I found was significant is my husband and I, we decided to move to a neighborhood where we were the minority. We didn't want our kids to grow up in a bubble. And we felt that it was appropriate living in an international city and the civil rights capital of the world to actually, not put ourselves in a gated community or a bubble and put them in charter or private school. We knew that they would most likely go to a charter or private school. So we thought it was very important for them to not be just in this closed in bubble. And we noticed that people in the poorer communities, also people in mixed communities, in international communities, they were struggling with crime. And it really hadn't hit the wealthy areas as much. It was really hampering the poorer areas, which are overlooked a lot of times by politicians and by actually eradicating the gang issues and, the overwrought with drugs, liquor stores on every corner, abortion clinics around every side street, and then hyping up the prices at the grocery stores in the poorer communities where, yes, they can use food stamps, but you would look at your local box of cereal that was $4.75 for Frosted Flakes. And then they would go to, Kroger or Publix and it'd be buy one, get one free. But they couldn't get there because you'd have to get on a bus. You'd have to ride 20 minutes, and then it's what you can carry back on the bus, usually with an umbrella stroller that you have to fold up, a baby that you're trying to keep quiet. It's usually hot or really cold. It's something that's very dampering. So you end up going to the corner store. And the best vegetables they have is like frozen spinach and then rotted bananas. So I noticed that, and then I noticed the crime, and then I noticed that the politicians were playing socioeconomic groups against one another. And sometimes it falls on race lines, but a lot of times it doesn't. But when the media reports it, they make it more about it being on race lines rather than socioeconomic divides. And it was usually by uh, certain districts of the city. And then you would just have the politicians feeding into the constituents by telling them, well, the people in the wealthy communities, we need them to donate more. And then they would go to the people in the wealthy communities and say, we just need to up taxes so we can help this area. Meanwhile, the money would disappear. You would still have blight in the poor communities. The poor communities would say the wealthier communities' public schools are getting more money, but that's because they're a larger tax base. But even here in Atlanta, like North Atlanta High School, they don't get the same amount that they would with the amount of taxes they put in. They put in an immense amount more, but some of their taxes actually go to the poorer communities, but the politicians don't tell the poorer communities this. So it actually pits people against the Buckhead area, which is seeing a huge uptick in crime. So right now we're pushing for a new mayor. We won, we got a new DA. And when we pushed for a new sheriff, we got our new sheriff. They're wonderful. They're fresh. They're energetic. And in the city of Atlanta, even if you're a Republican, you're gonna be given a choice of a Democrat, a progressive Democrat, or an independent that the media and everyone is going to push to state that they're more Democrat than they are independent. So you actually have to go and meet your elected officials, and you'll find something really spectacular when you do. You'll find that political parties aren't as amazing as the character of the person. So yes, look on the planks of their platform, see what they stand for, but their character is far more important than the party that they're party to, because you really want someone who's approachable, someone who will meet with any socioeconomic group, somebody who will be honest with you. So if you say, I want this bill to pass, or I want this, they will tell you to your face, no, and this is why. You know where you stand. There's not a placating to try to get people's votes. And that's what you're looking for. So you may not get that Republican you want, or that conservative you want, or that Democrat you want. But you need to look at the character of the person. And that's what we found out when we pushed for Fonnie Willis to replace a district attorney, Paul Howard, who was a mess. And then we replaced Ted Jackson. It wasn't that he was a horrible sheriff. He had just been in the position for a very long time. He was older, and he wasn't able to really reach the public. And he allowed for a lot of people that were in his kind of close-knit group to be the ones that would tell him who he should speak to. So he missed a lot of opportunities. And so we pushed for Pat Labat. He's wonderful, wonderful family man. And he's got some great ideas. And right now, he and the Mayor Bottoms, are not seeing eye to eye. And so with quite a few things, and we are pushing for Felicia Moore. She is a Democrat. She's more of a conservative Democrat. And Keisha is more all over the place. She's wonderful to the business community, the ones that are quiet, because they get really good deals. Whether it be for construction or business opportunities. So the wealthier part of Atlanta that will not vote for Felicia are because they do get kickbacks from Keisha. So what we're dealing with now is a sabotage from both sides of the aisle. And so it's a great challenge. And I'm very excited to find each one of these amazing people who think they can get one over on the constituents of Atlanta who deserve more. Her name is Felicia Moore, and Atlanta does deserve more. So that's who we're pushing for. And right now you have conservatives that have now had a woman named Sharon Gay enter the race. And she's supposed to get the white people out to vote because she's white. And that's how shallow they think we are. We're just going to vote for someone because they're white. And no, we're also intelligent. So please don't insult us. She actually worked for Bill Campbell in his, and he went to jail for fraud for a time. And she really is beholden to Kasim Reed, who was helpful in getting Keisha Bottoms elected along with the Biden administration. And so they are the business communities and the wealthier conservatives that are very quiet about what they're doing are pushing for Sharon Gay to compete against Felicia Moore, while on the far left, they're asking Antonio Brown, who is a city council member who was indicted on credit card fraud charges, which he shouldn't even still be on city council. It's a mess. And he's running for mayor because Kasim Reed wants to make sure to divide and conquer, to confuse the issue, and to, he thinks, get white people to vote for someone because they're white, and then get the progressives to vote for Antonio, who more than likely will have to deal with his indictment before the mayoral race. And that will just leave Keisha in the headwind, and she will be catching up pretty quick. And then all of a sudden we will be left with the same mayor. And, you know, they played with fire both sides of the aisle when it came to cheating and manipulating for years. And now the constituents are dealing with the repercussions, but we're done with dealing with being treated like we're ignorant. So we've got a couple things up our sleeves, and it's called staying informed, being wise, being out front, being honest, and working with all socioeconomic groups to get them to understand the best candidate for Atlanta. She was the one who was awake at all hours of the night, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. when riots were going on, when there was homicides going on. She addressed those on all sides of the street racers, the ATV riders that want to be rebellious. She went to meet with them to ask them what they were wanting. She then explained to them, because they wanted the wealthy neighborhoods to build them a racing track. The wealthy neighborhoods are like, you can't just break the rules to get what you want. She did a live video so that the wealthier neighborhoods could see what the ATV rebellious guys were saying. And then she spoke to them about how the wealthier neighborhoods were feeling. She's out on the street. She calls herself a public servant who's an elected official. And the reason why they don't like Felicia Moore is she's not paid off. She's not bought off. She's not predictable, and they can't control her. And that's why Atlantans love her so much.
You always bring a voice of optimism, and I love it. I'm happy for your involvement and your enthusiasm. And one of the things that I want to take out of what you just said, and thank you for that. I want to consider the idea that you talked about, which is character, and is there character in our politicians? You find character in the people that you have chosen to support. And that's the main reason that you support them. And, you know, say what you mean what you say, has kind of left the stage in our national scene. And, you know, even when you say, well, I'm promising you $2,000 a month, and, you know, then you have to fight for 1,400, you realize that the truth is been a victim, and we're no longer able to rely on what our national politicians say. It's great to hear you being so optimistic, but one of the things that I think, one of the things that makes a difference is the national push for what they call identity politics. That is, you should vote with the people that are like you. Okay, and that means if you're an Asian and you know you have kids in school, well, you should vote like all Asians that have kids in school, or something like that. But it really just kind of turns into a race. And I'm wondering if you run into that. Is that something that the phrase identity politics hit your radar screen?
Yes. So I try not to get worked up about it, because humans are tribal by nature. And there's actually something beautiful all over the world. There's a beautiful movie. It's a documentary called Baraka. It shows every type of person in every country. It shows their rituals, how they get married, how they dance, and that sovereignty and that identity, I think, is beautiful. And how I am as a person. We all wouldn't have been created differently if we weren't supposed to be. We all wouldn't be speaking different languages if we weren't supposed to be. And I think that's very honorable, and I think that's absolutely beautiful. However, when we are dealing with tribalism, we need to remember that when human beings get involved, they'll exploit that. They'll exploit our natural tendencies. And there's really nothing wrong with, wanting to be around somebody who is familiar to you. However, when that's exploited and we're dealing with identity politics, Then when tribalism is mixed with high emotions and deceit and manipulation, that's when you get violence, and that's when you get destruction, and actual um, education goes away, communication goes away, proper debate, um, ev- evolving goes away. So a lot of times people, even those who say they don't believe in a God and they believe in science, I find it very strange that they would pursue behaviors that do not help with evolution, in which they claim is actually, how we all came to be. So in fact, doing things and causing issues on this earth between people by exploiting their natural tendency to tribalism, which is beautiful in many ways, they've actually caused such a backlash that every identity group now tends to act in a prejudice manner, um, and they have deep fear about other groups, and they've decided that if something evil comes, it's going to come from a different group and not from their group. And when you look at character instead of identity politics, it's very easy to see, because everyone should have let their yes be yes and their no be no. And your word should be your bond, and you should care about what your output is. And if you do, and you follow through and you don't flake out, or when you do, you admit where you have fallen or where you haven't really, stepped up where you said you would, that's called chastening. And that's a beautiful thing too. And so we really need to, as people, be able to take criticism and look at it as a gift. And we should also not fear another group before we do our due diligence, because right now we're being manipulated to hate every group of people and on lands that are different, and to see automatically, oh, well, it must be this group because I'm feeling uncomfortable about them, rather than I need to dig in. I need to see if it's actually the people or a few people running it, or maybe a group of people who have a lot of money intertwined within that government. And I think being able to parse that and being able to understand that you can find beauty in a group of people and actually have many friends in that group, and not naturally that be your tribe. And if you actually went by character and by what you like and what you're interested in, you would find that most tribes would then be multiculturalist, because you would have people of all different age groups, genres, that tend to like and have this type of personality and have these likings. So we've fallen short in teaching children sociology, psychology, and communications, and linguistics, and how to communicate and not be emotional, and rather be more factual, and to listen, to understand when someone's really hyped up and they're really afraid. Try to hear what they're saying, and then let them understand what the other side might be thinking as well. Because if they don't understand that other side of the coin, all you're doing is arguing with them, saying that's not true or that's stupid, rather than explaining why you may be seeing that. But understand, people over in this socioeconomic group feel the same way that you do. We're just being divided because there are people that use linguistics and sociology to do so. And so the more we're educated with that, is the better off we'll be.
That's very profound, and I think you make some amazing connections there that few people will make, because once you start talking about tribalism, well, it's not too far before you start thinking about racism and then Nazism and the Holocaust and all that horrible stuff. But that doesn't mean that we aren't essentially tribal beings, and that's something that you said so well. I'm really impressed with that thought. It's something I will keep in mind, and I appreciate it. Um, well, but we also mentioned before that, and just not trying to bring you down or anything, but you mentioned a lot of politicians that you're familiar with
Yes.
that get kickbacks, and I'll tell you that that is one of the worst things that we could possibly do in our society, is to have politicians that get kickbacks. It's been a fight that we've been trying to maintain. It's like trying to maintain a wall against a flood that's coming at you. And that flood is called corruption. And that corruption will destroy this country if we let it. Um, People somehow just get seduced into a situation where they're kind of almost forced to take that extra $5,000 and, just don't say anything about it. And, the next time it happens, maybe it's a little easier, or maybe it's more like you've got to do it this time because you did it the last time and you get hooked into it. I'm just speculating of how it is that people get into this, but right now it's not just on the local scene. It's not just on the city scene. Oh, it's on the international scene where most of the world is subject to corruption, and it's only the United States and the few Western countries that, maybe there's some other ones that I don't know about, but they're economically not that significant. If we lose our sense of morality as that I'm not going to take a bribe, I'm not going to take a kickback, um, then we're going to lose the country. I think that's one of the most important questions we can ask is how do we stop a cycle that gets started with some politicians of working with various developers or on a more national scale working with arms merchants?
Well, I would say, as constituents and as people who, I know it's very debilitating, and I know they don't seem to listen. And then those who are blind to the manipulation by our elected officials, we all get caught up in the gaslighting that happens, and then just the declaring there was no fraud or there was fraud, and being, mocked if you have any kind of information, and being told to prove it. I would say that um, our politicians, when they went in to serve us, the reason why they did it, from what they say, and if we were to take them at their word, it was to make the world a better place. It was to do something and lead the American people. Well, you shouldn't be paid for the rest of your life. You also, um, there should be a lot of restrictions. One being, you cannot use the stock market during that time in office. You have to do an indexed annuity. It has to stay still while you're in office. You cannot, like, for instance, most people who are pushing the new vaccine, I bet you $1,000,000 to 1, it's very important to them because they've invested heavily in it. The same with most of the things that our elected officials push. That's why it's so easy for lobbyists to come in and out. I think that there should be severe restrictions on lobbying, because what they have done is they've gotten the upper hand over our vote. And when they take the oath, it's not to serve the lobbyists. And therefore, our elected officials are paid off. And a lot of times, because it's so dirty and it's so ugly, they really can't stop the avalanche after they said yes to, AG Farben, or one of these Bayer, or one of these, companies that really overstep their boundaries, but nobody's going to say anything because that same company gave them, as much money as they possibly could, and all their employees gave them as much money because their board members and their employees were encouraged as to who to vote for. And I think that it really behooves us as a country and as the world. If you're going to say you're here to serve people, you need to serve. We're not here to serve you. That's not the reason why we've entrusted our vote to you. We vote for you because you were the one that raised your hand and said, I can make recess longer. That's a joke, but it's you stood up to say, vote for me, I've got your back. And essentially, we're finding that the only way that you can get in is by money. And they've made it so expensive and so difficult that it's very hard to get the vote unless you knock on every single person's door in your district and in your area. But even then, you have to claim a political party. And if you claim independent, they will look for everything under the sun to try to catch you in a corner. They'll have a reporter call you. They will twist your words, because if it's not one side of the wing of the bird, it's the other, or one side of the coin, it's the other. And even though, the conservatives and liberals, they're supposedly always at odds, I find it odd that our path forward is the same no matter who is in office. And I think that's something that it's not conspiratorial. They're not serving us. And, it's their responsibility to do so. And we need to hold them to a higher standard. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with us demanding that. In fact, that's our job, is to demand it. And so I'm very vocal about it. And I'm not afraid to voice the fact that I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed in their lackluster pretending to care about the least of these while they let fentanyl and every kind of drug bleed into these neighborhoods and then say, we're the only ones who care about you. I call BS. You know how to get the drugs out. You know how to keep the cartels at bay, and you're not doing it. And, we're not stupid. And that's the problem, is that's what their fault. That's why it seems so brutal lately, because they had to go back to carnal behavior because we were getting too wise to understand a lot of the trickery. And, I think that is so demeaning for them to treat us in that way and expect us to be great all over the world, where we're high up on the education system. Our athletes are the best. When you're debilitating people and crushing their very spirit by not actually being who you state that you are, and stressing them where they don't know if they're going to run into violence, if there's going to be another riot, if there's going to be a coup, if there's going to be, something on the news that didn't go that way. And, they're causing families to split. They're causing high stress. They're literally playing with our emotional stability, and then they want us to be hard workers. They want us, they want us to go out and produce and be amazing and not complain. Well, I mean, that's not very scientific what they're doing. In fact, they're shooting their foot despite their face at this point. You can't expect both things. You're either here to torture people, to make us feel left out and be afraid of one another, but then you're not going to have a good workforce. You're not going to make any money. You're literally going to lose power on the world stage. And do you know how many lives have been lost so you can gain that power? I thought you were going to do something great with the power. What are you doing? So I've got a lot of questions, and they don't seem to have answers, and that's a problem. So we need to replace the ones who seem to be the most lackluster and work our way up to then get the people we deserve. We don't need tempters. We need shepherds, but we need those who care about their flock and not just mock sheep after they make a sheep. It's quite disgusting, actually.
Well, it is. And it's not just in Georgia. It's not just where I live. It's everywhere in this country, and that's what I was trying to emphasize, is that as much as character counts, when you get past a certain amount of corruption, it's kind of hard to make a difference, and we're stuck there right now. It's your good people that you're supporting there are going to need tons and tons of support,
Yes.
whatever party they're in order to get anything good done, and they're going to need vocal support like you to be a good citizen and support. That's I'm just very, very pleased at your attitude. And yeah, you recognize the evil that you're talking about, and you mentioned psychological warfare against us to depress us. Well, there is going to come a time when they don't need us as a workforce, and this is where I think that this is going, because of my studies, is that the overall plan is to lower the United States of America's standard of living while raising the standard of living of places in the third world, like China, for instance, and getting to a point where everybody's pretty much got the same standard of living. The standard is going to be quite low, and much lower than we are used to in this country, because we've basically been subsidized and are still being subsidized by these incredible loans that the government keeps taking out into trillions of dollars now against the future of this country. We're never going to be able to pay off $20 trillion. It's just insane. Yet that's the way the circuit, the economy is working right now. It's just on borrowed money, working, on the churn, on the float, on the money that just passes through hands. And that's why we noticed just the other night that Goldman Sachs maintains $1 trillion of availability for overnight bank loans. You find yourself short $1 trillion, just call Goldman Sachs and they'll carry you overnight till you can, straighten things out tomorrow. This is impossible for us. This is a breakaway, financial system, and that's why I'm concerned that, while you're right, and most people would say, hey, if you don't treat us well, you're not going to get the labor that you need, and they probably are thinking, well, you know what, we can get that labor done, just as well in Iran, in China, in 1,000 places around the world. We don't need you guys anymore. And so just sit down and shut up while we lower your standard of living. That's really what I think that uh, the whole thing, the eugenics is aimed at reducing the number of people, and the economic policy called Keynesianism is aimed at reducing the income and the wealth of people, headed right into the hands of Klaus Schwab, who says you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And Amber, I really do believe that's the direction we're going into. So you've been watching my shows a bit. I see you in the chat room quite often. Let's I'd like to hear how you react to the guests that I've been having on the economy from Schiller Institute and other places that we've been talking to. Garland Nixon is a very fascinating man, and I'd like to hear if you've been watching them. What are your thoughts, and where do you agree? Where do you disagree?
I really enjoy Garland's passion. He is a little bit more left of me, but as I was trying to say earlier, side of the aisle, yes, on a few items, there are things that we would vote differently on, but his overall feeling about being let down on leadership is what everybody is feeling. And with Harley Schlanger, he is on point when it comes to understanding foreign politics and the hidden hands and Great Britain's great job of never letting go of our country. And then I don't know why they want our country so bad. I mean, I just wouldn't want somebody or want a thing that doesn't want me back. I think that's it shows desperation. And so if you are a Great Britain, you don't need anything other than what you have because you're great, right? So let's act great rather than desperate. And as far as these guys like Klaus Schwab, what it shows me is they're not really natural born leaders. You see, a natural born leader takes what's there and does wonderful things with it and encourages others to grow and to do well. Someone who's not a natural leader, but just wants power, tries to decrease the amount of things and items that they have to deal with so that then they can handle it better. So I see it more of a unintellectual group of people that have told themselves while looking in the mirror that they are brilliant and they are great leaders. Well, actually, a great leader is not looking at how to decrease the people that they're wanting to lead. They're actually looking at the potential of all the people that stand before them. They're encouraging people to think for themselves, to actually be a leader in their own right, while they're guiding people to understand that action and reaction, cause and effect. So yes, this might be a good invention. However, in 1920, this actually happened and it led to this. I like your ideas. I like what you're doing, but just remember that wastewater can end up in a pond. And the reason why we have this regulation is because it killed this many fish and it gave this many people cancer. Like, to gently lead when you have people that have entrepreneurial skills, really great ideas, and people all over the world who want to be given the opportunity to not only be independent, but to show their own sovereignty within themselves as they stand in their own sovereign country. So, and I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying that it reflects more negatively on them that they're so controlling and manipulative because that's all that they can do, because they're really not good at leadership. They're just good at knocking people off the ladder and getting there first. And that's not really commendable. That's quite embarrassing. And I would feel shame doing that. So I guess it's just a shameless way to for them to uplift themselves. And so I know that they're thinking that this is the best way to handle it. But I think that's why so many of us fear what's going on, is because we know they can't already handle what they've got, and that they don't know what they're doing. And yet that's what's dangerous, is they think we'll do this and we'll get this out of it. And 9 times out of 10, it backfires. And so, I would just like to say, as a woman in my mid 40s, raising 2 kids, doing my best, trying to earn my vote, trying to earn a voice, and putting in the hard work, not afraid to labor, not afraid to lend my ear to people in other countries, but at the same time care about my country, not wanting to just throw it all, the towel in, but give mutual respect, but also be happy that I was born and that I'm able to live and that I'm able to eat and enjoy life, rather than looking for a way to outwit and outdo somebody else, or to tear down someone else. So I'm doing my part as best as I can. And it's quite disconcerting to see that you have people that have a lot of money. And I think they've equated that with intellectual prowess. And those two things are not the same. And understanding people, that's not the same, because you actually have like the Jack Dorsey and Zuckerberg, they have a lack of understanding what happens when you censor people and then you cut them off, and how that can be a backlash. And so right now they think it's a controlling mechanism, and it's not lost on me that the minute DARPA disappeared, Facebook, came out of the blue. I'm not really conspiratorial. I just notice things. And so, 2 + 2 is 4. We'll see. We'll see. But I think a lot of times when people overplay their hand, it's to overcompensate for their lack of really understanding the bigger picture. And so that's what behooves us to not fall for, using our anger and fighting against somebody that they want us to fight against, but pushing back on their leadership. Because essentially, if I feel divided from you, and I'm upset because you believe one thing and I believe another, why am I not more upset that the leaders have laid it out in a way where we are at odds? That shows that they're responsible for causing people to be enemies. And that says that they have a lack of leadership skills, because they need to do that to stay in power. So if I were them, I would be more fearful of thinking that I could decrease the population and that I could control these things, because these are things in the hands of God. These are not things in the hands of man. And they're playing with fire. And it's people like me. I'm verbal about it. But there's a lot of people who feel the same way. And we're not impressed with people who use big words and say nothing. So that's how I feel about where they're leading us. They should rethink, and they should understand what being a true leader is. And if they're not a natural born leader, why are they in the way of the natural born leaders waiting to lead what they were born to do?
Well, I'm afraid that I would have an answer for you, and it's not very pretty. The answer is because they are thieves. They are not leaders, they're thieves. And the problem that we face in this country is that we think these thieves are leaders. And we've been seduced into that by the media, which they own. And so now we see these talking heads that, running for office and all, I just don't believe any of it anymore. It's all puppets. It's all, as Andy Craig's great book says, it's presidential puppetry. That's where we're stuck right now. And to me, the answer is Congress. Congress makes the laws. We have got to get our resolution of this by reining in these crazy military-industrial complex boondoggles that really are part of an attempt by a small number of extremely wealthy people to just keep on taking everything, like Pac-Man, just get every single little uh, thing on the playing board, and that's what they use us for. We're the muscle. We're the goons. We're the guys that say, go up to the guy and say, you want the sack of money or the bullet to the head. Which one you want today? We'll give you your choice. And we're the bad guys that will do that. That's how we keep getting all this money from the banks. They wouldn't lend it to us if we were just saying, well, no, we're not going to do anything for you. We're just going to be straight, moral Christian, uh, God-fearing people. They wouldn't lend the money to moral Christian, God-fearing people. They will only lend it to the people that are willing to do the dirty work, to go out and take down the next little country or the next oil-rich region, or grab the uranium mine or the water supply or whatever. Just grab like Pac-Man whatever they can, because they're not leaders. They're thieves.
And I do understand what you're saying, and I find myself being in reality of what you're saying, but also having to mother two boys, one that just turned 10 and one that's about to be 7. And so when I speak to them, I always have to remember to teach them to have an expectancy of what we deserve as a people, but then to let them understand the reality of what we're dealing with right now. And one of those realities is the fact that there are men and women willing to give their life in order to protect our country, and then they find out that they're just protecting a pipeline for a and that's really that is quite awful to put men who are willing, because they're just, that's how they were born, just like to protect, and they're not thinking they're just going to go in and see the atrocities and be told from higher ups this is how it's going to be, and to know something's not right, but they push on and push on because to them they're protecting us, and it's not really protecting us, and it's very layered like an onion. And so the more people that understand that we really look at each other as people who need to work together and allow someone to have their belief system, but not to cram it down someone else's throat. And to give the respect that we're demanding from someone else, and then not spread lies and propaganda because our team told us to. And so, there's a lot of us parents out there that our kids are being confused. It's people like Mitt Romney that put money into the medications and hormones that would actually be given to our children without our permission, so they can change their sex when they're confused. Their frontal lobe is not even developed. They don't even know who they are. And yet an adult is telling them to think about their sexuality. And then mothers want to be cool, or fathers want to be cool. And instead of watching your child develop and being cautious and wise with trying to allow your child to grow up, the pressure that's being put on them and the confusion, we have Mitt Romney, who owns those companies, who pushes that, but then goes to the Mormon church, acts like he's Jesus Christ incarnate, and he's just trying to do good things, and to tell them that liberals are bad, except when you want to get rid of Trump, and then you tell them to vote for Biden because you want to bring in the white horse prophecy. So if we look, you'll see there's a very fascist element that's in charge of the communist element. So right now, communists think that they're in charge. And that's where you're getting the gaslighting from people who are thinking they're marching to the beat of like everything's going to be fair. But they're actually doing it for the people who that's their, the people like Mitt Romney need people to do those marching, orders, and to go out and wreak havoc, so that then when it gets really, really bad in 4 years, everyone's desperate for someone. And then he comes in with like these middle of the road things that he doesn't allow anybody else to have. Like, that's why you have him, who has a big part in the media, taking people down like Ron DeSantis, like taking anybody who has the potential of standing up against, something, whether they're on the left or the right, they're going to be knocked down by him, because that's his competition. And he's going to use the media and money to do so, because they already know that that's the type of person that they want, who pretends to be one thing. And I think it's very destructive for someone to tear up a system and then say that they're there to build it back up and pretend someone else tore it down. And so, before we end tonight, I'll explain what's happening with the Georgia voter law and how we're all hearing about this and we're all being fed misinformation, and why that's important, because it's the tit for tat that goes on within our local politics, and behind the scenes we're the never Trumpers that told the left that Trump was a fascist and made him out to be Hitler incarnate, when in fact their family members and their ancestry actually has them being very intertwined with the Hitler regime. So it's very nightmarish, especially when you have communists that are convinced they're in control right now. And it's like, no, you're being used, and then you'll be dumped, and then you'll be like, what happened? And, I don't like communism, and I don't like fascism, and that's just not my groove, not even close. I like our constitutional republic. I think it's beautiful. I think people deserve to have a voice, and I'm not into monarchy. I think we've moved past that, especially for our country. If that's something other countries want, so be it. Wonderful. But, we've earned our constitutional republic, and we're not perfect. But why should we throw the baby out with the bathwater when we can just perfect something that's one of the best things that we've had so far on Earth?
Yeah, I agree with you. And yeah, well said. How's your singing? Are you singing at all?
Well, we have 2 pecan trees in our yard, and I'm allergic to the pollen. As you can tell, my voice is a little
Okay.
raspy. I'm not allergic to eating them because I love
Yeah.
pecan pie, but I am allergic to when the pollen falls. I get, and this is that pollen is everywhere.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the best, I'm able to do alto, but it's a bit raspy. It's usually the first 3 weeks of spring is when the pollen really gets me.
Well, I envy you the pecan trees anyway. We I've been talking with the folks at Schiller Institute, and of course Schiller, the great poet for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, and they are really big into singing, and they get together and sing a lot. They have their own choir, and that's one of the big things that they're pushing is classical music education. And that say that the Chinese are educating all the kids, and have more orchestras in China than they have in I guess Europe and America combined. It's just the point being that to me, whenever I go and sing with people, it does have anything to do with anybody's race, religion, color, upbringing, nothing. It's all about the music. It's all about sharing the incredible feeling of singing together in a group, or participating in any type of organized performance. That to me is where real life is. It doesn't have to be music, but it has to be something that transports us into a zone where we and other people, other minds, other people's spirits are joined together. And like it says in the lyric of that, everybody, alle Menschen werden Brüder, everybody becomes brothers and
Brothers, yeah.
sisters. That it doesn't have anything to do with what you look like. There's no identity politics in music. And so that's one thing I think you and I both have latched on to, and it surely does help keep me sane. Although I'm not singing much right now, I know that it's there for me, and it's a resource that I can always take part in. I can go join a chorus, or I can just get my guitar out and work on some old rock and roll songs.
Yeah, music is the great healer. There's nothing like standing with a group of people, and in our chorus, there's every kind of person and every kind of opinion. But once our conductor raises his hands, and it's time, we need each other. We require each other. We need to support one another while we're singing. So it's like a teamwork that once done and done correctly, it's absolutely beautiful. And so you're encouraged to want the person beside you to be successful in what they're doing. There's no competition. Well, there is if someone wants to be heard over everyone else, and then we call them foghorn, and then someone will lightly say, "Shh, we're all singing together." The people who like to solo during where everybody is supposed to be having the same kind of output. But that's rare, because a lot of times, especially with these older classical pieces, there's a deeper meaning. And once you feel the music, your heart requires you to feel all those around you, and hope and pray while you're singing that everybody is able to successfully, feel that magic. And so it's a very beautiful situation to be on a stage with 120 people, and you're not competing with any of them. And afterwards, when it really does well, your eyes get glazed over, you're emotional, your heartbeat is racing, and people are screaming encore, and everything else doesn't matter for that good 30 seconds to a minute and a half. You can't smile bigger. And it's just hard to translate that into real world, and how we deal with that on a bigger stage, where people don't have that same continuity of working together. And I can also talk about our local, just to set the record straight, so people stop thinking that the new Georgia voter law is not Jim Crow.
Yeah, let's cover that before we have to close out.
Okay. So in-person early voting dates and times, they were expanded under the law. And the new law requires 3 weeks of early voting, with voting times scheduled for at least 8 hours and up to 12 hours. Polls are allowed to open as early as 7 a.m. and close as late as 7 p.m. Weekend voting is also expanded, and mandating 2 Saturdays of early voting and giving counties the option to offer 2 Sundays of early voting was put in this bill. You also have to show an ID now in person, but from my understanding, the new bill also requires it for absentee ballots. And that's really where a lot of the hyperbolic rhetoric is coming from. So if you vote by absentee, you have to provide a copy of your state-issued ID. Georgia bill, unfortunately, does not fix a lot of the problems we've experienced in recent elections. For instance, declaring the number of ballots there are to count would be a great place to start. We don't declare the number of ballots that there should be to count. You cannot even do an accurate recount if you don't know how many ballots you have to start with. And Philip Starks, the professor at Berkeley who wrote the audit, even said this. So even someone on the far left who supported the outcome of the election states that there's no way to properly audit. Texas, Florida, and Alabama, and other states that don't have all these voting problems are required to do this by law. And yet our legislature seems to fall short as usual. And about the ballot drop boxes, they were introduced as emergency measures by Governor Kemp during the pandemic, but the bill allows some to be made permanent. However, it limits the counties to 1 drop box per 100,000 residents. It also requires drop boxes to be placed inside early voting locations. What's interesting is Delaware and Colorado, where the MLB is going to be moving their game, they have stricter voting laws than Georgia. So that is insane that Delaware, where Biden is from, it's more strict than in Georgia. And he's calling this Jim Crow. Well, if this is Jim Crow, his must be awful in Delaware. And then one section of the bill would make it illegal to give money or gifts, including food or water, to people waiting in line to vote. The law is applicable inside a polling place within 150 feet of a building serving as a polling place and within 25 feet of a voter standing in line. So it doesn't keep the polling place itself giving out waters. It keeps people going and pressuring people to vote for certain people or have like a promotion for someone on the bottled water. And then I don't see any restrictions. In New York, there are only 10 days of early voting. Here, it's 3 weeks. Under the Election Integrity Act, Georgia now has 17 mandatory days of early voting with the option for 2 additional Sundays. Let's be clear. New York requires an excuse for absentee voting. Georgia does not. And while New York just enacted automatic voter registration in December, Georgia has had it in place for years. And then the last thing, let's be clear, The very fact our mayor is making a big stink about this just proves she hasn't read the bill, or it will hamper her chances to win re-election in the Atlanta mayoral race. I think it's the latter. If you don't have a driver's license, you can use a state ID. If you don't have a state ID, you can use at least 4 digits of your social security number, or just use your social security card. If you don't have that, use your birth certificate. If you don't have that, use the utility bill. So many. The only one that was removed was signature verification. And the MLB game just went to a state that has the same laws as Georgia. There's not a single first world country that allows you to vote without using an ID. So the way that they're throwing around racism, I think their purpose is to make the word racism be non-existent, and to do a big detriment so that when we face real racism, we won't know what to do. And it would be like Pied Piper or Peter and the Wolf, constantly saying the same thing until it goes on deaf ears. And that's when we have the same atrocities that have happened in our past happen again. So every time they say racist and Jim Crow, that actually tells me that they're wanting to make those words mean nothing so that later they can be exploited. So if it behooves them to stop that mess. It's absolutely irresponsible, because when you see racism, you should stand up against it and you should point it out. But if it's not there, you should keep your mouth shut, because you're causing a lot of pain, especially in minority communities. They were already told that they're the ones who suffer COVID more than anybody else. And then you're doing a bigger detriment by playing with their emotions to get their vote. And how dare you lecture everybody else about racism when what you're doing in itself is debilitating a group of people that just so happen to be children of God also. And that's it.
All right, that's it. And Joe Biden, I have to say, it's not hard to find him being a racist. He was campaigning against desegregating the schools of Delaware early in his career. That's for him to use the Jim Crow. No, he can't play that card. He's disqualified from playing that card, I'd say. And Amber Connor, thank you so much. Anybody wants to run for office in Georgia, by the way, I'd advise you to call Amber Connor before you do anything, and make sure that you have a chance. And that means you got to have character, and you've got to pay attention, and you've got to think of the best interest of the people. Thanks again, Amber, for being with us. Thanks, everybody, for joining us in the chat room. And look forward to talking to you again. I hope, Amber. Have a great rest of the week. And everybody, hang in there. We will talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.